Hi everyone, thanks for joining us for our online training series. Today we're going to go through 25 quick tips we can use to use the strategies of explicit instruction to support students with challenging behaviors. You've got a handout that you can use and also links to slides if you'd like to view those separately from this video. Keep in mind this is part of our online training series, so if you'd like to look more in depth at the 16 elements of explicit instruction, check out the other series that's video and training series that's available at our website. The foundation for explicit instruction comes from the text Explicit Instruction by Anita Archer and Charles Hughes, a foundational, phenomenal read if you haven't already done that. And there is extensive research behind explicit instruction. Here I've hyperlinked in an article from What Works Clearinghouse looking at ways we can reduce problem behaviors. This article goes through all of the evidence base and lets you know more about the foundations of explicit instruction. When we're looking at explicit instruction, the quick reminder is that it is a systematic instructional approach. It's all about how we deliver and design our lessons and how we support our students in the learning process. There are 16 explicit elements within the world of explicit instruction, and keep in mind that explicit instruction is synonymous with direct instruction. Those two terms mean the same thing when you're looking at the research. For students with disabilities, there are lots of fantastic articles that help us look at how we can use explicit instruction to support a variety of learning needs. Specifically, this article from Teaching Exceptional Children looked at how we could use direct instruction or explicit instruction to support working memory. So it's got phenomenal research and a phenomenal bang for your buck, so to speak, in that explicit instruction supports all students. It definitely helps students with disabilities, and it helps students with disabilities in a variety of ways, from supporting their working memory to decreasing behavioral outbursts in the classroom. It is hands down, in my opinion, the best evidence-based strategy we can use to support the learning of all students, including students with disabilities. Make it your bestie. A lot of us talk about the value of project-based and inquiry-based learning, and we know that both of those concepts can be phenomenal. But if you're looking at Hattie's evidence, you're going to see that it has a smaller effect size, not as large as explicit instruction. And we know that often project-based and inquiry-based learning are places where students with disabilities disengage from the learning, whether they're demonstrating some significant acting out behaviors, ripping up papers, yelling out, leaving the classroom, or whether they are shutting down, heads down, crying in class, refusing to participate. They're delaying and dawdling so long on writing their name on the paper that they never engage in the concept. And when we wonder why that is, it is often these outside arrows that students don't have the concept knowledge. They don't have the knowledge itself. They don't have the strategies they need to engage, or they don't have the skills that are necessary to tackle this challenging problem, right? So in inquiry or project-based learning, we've given you a challenging problem. We want you to struggle productively to be successful. But if our students don't have these outside circles, then they're never getting into this project. We've got to make sure that we provide explicit instruction on the concepts needed to get to the challenging problem, the skills needed to be able to tackle this challenging problem, right? The knowledge necessary to know where to even go to find information, and then those strategies. We can build all of those using explicit instruction. So, Big Brock here is use explicit instruction first to teach the concepts, skills, strategies, and knowledge, and then dive deep to explore through projects and inquiry-based learning. Without further ado, let's dig into tip 1. If you expect it, whatever it is, pre-correct it. So if students are running in the halls and I expect it, I'm going to pre-correct it before we ever leave the classroom, I'm going to say, hey, everybody, we're getting ready to head to the hallway to go down to lunch. Let's walk through the procedures of walking in the halls and talk through those procedures. Model it, practice it, pre-correct it. Pre-correction is all about teaching that positively, proactively. So instead of waiting, watching, because I know what's going to happen, and then saying, nope, 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 no running in the hallways, I'm going to pre-correct that. I'm like, hey, everybody, we're getting ready to go. Do this task. Let's talk through the procedures. Hey, we're getting ready to start our lab. Let's remind ourselves of the procedures so that we're all safe in the lab. Let's review them together. Josh, do you mind sharing the poster up on the wall? Candace, can you join in? Let's talk through those procedures. If I'm going to call on individual students and ask them to share procedures, I want to make sure that I'm not setting students up for failure in a situation in which they would not feel comfortable. So if I was going to call on Josh, I'd make sure before I asked that I had privately shared with Josh, hey Josh, would you mind sharing the procedures today? If you're not comfortable, no worries. I can ask somebody else, but thought I'd start with you, right? Build those relationships, pre-correct any behaviors that might happen. When we're asking questions in the classroom or engaging with students in an activity, I always like the strategy called me or we. So me or we is something you would teach as a UDL, Universal Design for Learning strategy. I teach it to everyone. I allow everyone to use it. And it just means that if I ask a question of a specific student, then I always say, hey, Sarah, we're looking at this problem of 4 + 2. I know that everybody solved it in your pair groups. Would you mind sharing the answer? Sarah and every student in the classroom has the option of choosing me or we. Me means, sure, I'm comfortable and I'll answer the question. We means everybody answers it together, right? And Sarah can always say, let's answer that as we. And then the teacher, me, I would say, great. All right, Sarah chose we. So the answer to 4 + 2 is, and the whole class answers. A different version of this is giving students options like these 4 on the right. Students can either answer the question, ask a clarifying question about the question you asked. They can comment on the question about the content knowledge, about the learning, about how they got to their answer, or they could share another thought. These 2 strategies eliminate the need for students to have to ask themselves, I don't know if the answer is right. I don't want to be embarrassed. So what can I do to get out of answering this, right? Make sure students always have an option to feel safe in the learning in our classrooms. Tip 3 involves our classroom space, and we know that space communicates. So we need to think through what our classrooms are saying to students. When we look at explicit instruction in the 16 elements, one of those elements is that we provide lots of support for student learning, meaning we can get around our entire classroom. If we ask a question and are having students working, can I move effectively, efficiently around my entire classroom, getting to every single student in the classroom quickly to engage with them, to ask questions about their learning, to support them if they have questions? Can they quickly read my room to find information? Can they find answers to questions? Do they know how to use the manipulatives in my classroom? If the answers to any of those questions are no, then I would consider what your space is communicating to students. Tip number 4 is that I need to be able as a teacher to see all in my classroom. So I want to make sure I can see everything. I don't want to have any times where students are working unsupervised, unmonitored, and I want to make sure that students can see each other. For many of our students with significant behaviors, whether those are acting out behaviors or students that demonstrate the E side of EBD, where they're shutting down in the learning process, students with a background of some kind of trauma, we want to make sure that they feel safe in our classroom. And often what they need to feel safe in the classroom is to ensure they can see everybody else and that they know that you, the supervisor, teacher in the classroom, are keeping them safe by seeing everything that's going on. When we're looking at tip number 4, seeing all, Anita Archer has some phenomenal sayings that she uses that I use to make sure I see everything. One of them is walk around, look around, talk around. which means that while instruction is happening in the classroom, I am continuously monitoring by walking, looking, and talking. This is meant to be a positive and proactive walk around, look around, talk around, not an I gotcha, not I'm waiting for you to screw up and fail. I'm looking for you to be off task. Get back on the right webpage. Not that at all, but, oh, wow, I love the way you're thinking. Oh, phenomenal process. Hey, do you think you could share your textbook with Sarah so that we're all on the same page and we'll just use the one book, save some room on our desks? Things that are building relationships with students. We also want to PEC, as Anita says, which stands for praise, encourage, and correct. Remember that when you're giving feedback, as a general rule, it's good to do that side by side instead of face to face. And by that, we mean we definitely want to be looking students in the eye. We definitely want to be face-to-face to engage with them. But if we're giving feedback that might feel to students like we're correcting them, we don't want it to seem confrontational. And face-to-face often makes students feel that we're being confrontational. But if we're side to side and our pointing and looking is at another object, like a piece of paper or their computer screen, then we're engaging with that and not confronting a student. So definitely have times where we're face-to-face looking at students and talking to them. That's really effective for praise and encourage. That correction phase is good to do side by side. We can also PEC in the terms of praise, encourage, and comment on what students are doing, offering our thoughts, wondering about things we're learning. The other version of PEC is PIE. Praise, inform, and encourage students to continue working. So maybe a student has gotten stuck on an element. We're going to inform them of the next step or inform them of where they can find that information, and then encourage them to continue their work in a positive, proactive way. Tip 5, what you expect is what you get. So if I expect students to make a mess of this assignment, I expect you to run in the hallway. I expect this to be a hot mess. Chances are it will be. I'm going to expect that students are going to engage in the learning, and my definition of perfect is that students are engaging in an attempt to learn. Not that we always have right answers, not that everyone did this in such beautiful handwriting that we could frame it on the walls, but rather that kids are learning, in the immortal words of our favorite teacher of all time, the Magic School Bus, right? Learning is messy sometimes. We need to get in there and get messy, and that's okay. But my perfect learning moment is when everybody is engaged and trying, right? Trying. Not looking for perfection, I'm looking for engagement. We also want to make sure that we're teaching the difference between goals and rules. Our goals are the big picture, and that's really what we're shooting for. The rules are those smaller components so that everyone in our classroom knows that they are safe and respected. We want to make sure that when we are teaching goals and rules, that we're pre-correcting so that we're constantly reviewing, not just in August and then expect everyone to get it, but that we are all year long pre-correcting by reminding students of the procedures, the rules, the goals of learning, so that they know exactly what's expected at each part of the day. And it's just a quick, positive, proactive way to keep us moving forward. So for example, all right, everyone, we're getting ready to break into our Think, Pair, Share groups. As a quick reminder, when we do Think, Pair, Share, I'm expecting to see 2 people with pencils in their hands, 2 people turned to each other. I'm expecting to see focus on the learning target, and if we have someone without a partner, that you're working in a bundle of 3. Any questions about those expectations? No? Let's go, right? Quick, positive. I'm pre-correcting an area where I think we might have a challenge. I want to always teach skills using the I do it, we do it, you do it formula, remembering that often for students with disabilities, they need a few more I do's, a lot more we do's before we ask them to independently be successful, whether it's an academic task or a behavioral expectation, like walking in the hallways. We know that predictability predicts the student's ability to be successful. So we want to make sure that our routines and our procedures in our classroom are very predictable, that students aren't constantly trying to guess, What's next? How are we going to do this today? How are we going to think, pair, share today? What are we going to do to practice this activity? How are we going to walk in the hallways? Are we going to walk in the hallways? Oh, maybe we're running at a fast jog today. What are we doing? We want our routine to be very predictable so that students know that seamlessly our day flows along, and that if it's time to engage in this activity, these are the procedures. Super predictable. If you'd like to watch a great why video, I've hyperlinked it into this slide 9 on the words why video. We want to make sure that we're always teaching critical routines like when to raise your hand in the classroom, when to ask for help, how to ask for help. We also want to make sure that every time we're giving instructions that we are giving wait times. If you think of wait time as at least 60 seconds and you wait for it, we increase the likelihood that students are going to be able to follow the directions and want to comply. Now, personal confession, I move really quickly, and I know that about myself as a teacher. So one way I ensure that I give wait time and that I'm only giving a single instruction at a time is I do it with my students. So if I'm asking them to get out their book, I walk over to a student and I work with them to get out their book. If I'm asking students to turn to page 452, then I'm saying to a student, hey, Tom, can I borrow your book? And then I turn to page 452. Little tip between you and I often know the students that are going to have trouble finding their spot on their book or finding the right web page or getting to the right app on time. And so I support those students by asking them if I can use their device or their book to turn to the right page. And then after I turn to the right page, one, I'm making sure and giving some wait time by enforcing myself to do the task. I'm also then handing it back to the student and saying, thanks for letting me use your book. This is a relationship building moment as opposed to me standing up in the front of the room, looking impatient, staring at everybody, and then saying, no, Tom, why aren't you on the right page? I told you 50 times. Why are you in the front of your book? 452 is in the back, right? We've all heard ourselves say these things, and we wonder as we're talking, why am I talking out loud? And yet we can't stop ourselves. So the way I stop myself is by supporting students by doing the task with them and then thanking them for allowing me to help. We want to teach from our feet, not from our seat. For those of us that wear Fitbits and all kinds of devices, we're getting our minutes and our steps in. So we want to make sure that we're moving around the classroom constantly, not stuck in one spot, and that students see our movement around the classroom not as an overseer being threatening of work that is happening in the classroom, but rather that they see our work as being supportive of their learning. As we teach from our feet and not from our seat, we also can clarify and verify. So I want to make sure that any directions that I give before students start work are understood. So clarifying usually is having students repeat the directions back, whether that's the whole group or a few students. And then verification is me either affirming that the students have all the steps or clarifying, oh, yeah, thanks for sharing that with me. So the last step is to, or I'm so glad you shared that. So let me clarify what I meant. And then I'm going to restate the expectations. If you are looking for great free resources, and I always am looking for free gifts, tip 14 is that there are 3 phenomenal resources around the area of explicit instruction. If you look at the retrievalpractice.org website, we know retrieval practice is critical to students moving information back and forth and being stored in the right long-term memory spot, being part of their working memory. Retrievalpractice.org is a phenomenal resource. LearningScientists.org and ExplicitInstruction.org have excellent resources to help you dive deeper into the world of explicit instruction. We know for tip 15 that if a student makes an error, we want to correct that error in a positive and proactive way. We're not going to accept errors in academic content or in behavioral expectations, because when we do that, then it builds that pathway in the student's brain that that's okay, or that information was correct. So if a student makes an error, we're going to do a very positive, proactive correction that is going to be relationship building. So for example, we're not going to use the word wrong or blah or what were you thinking, but rather we're going to say things like, thanks for that attempt, or wow, I see that that took a lot of time, or you spent a lot of effort on that assignment. Let's look at problem 3 again. Or let's look at that logic together. Wow, if I'm going to solve that problem, let me walk through the steps again, and we'll see where we need to change our process. Tip 16, we want to give glows and grows to help students gain the ability to self-correct their behavior in the future. So glows and grows are always looking for what we call that, approximation of success. There was something that student did that was probably correct. There is one element of what happened that was a good thing that we can praise, right? It might be a good start. It might be the fact that they persevered along. It might be that they asked for help. But we're going to praise the things we want students to do again and again, and we're going to be very clear and explicit in our praise so that students can repeat that performance over time. Just good job doesn't tell a student what was good, what should I do again, but really targeted praise on the task that we want students to do over and over again. We definitely want to praise effort over IQ, over 100%, over a right answer, because praising effort over IQ, according to the research base led by work like Carol Dweck's work, which is hyperlinked in here, shows that when we praise effort, students are likely to persevere over time and continue to try. When we praise IQ, or how smart a student is, often it shuts down students from trying again because they're afraid of not receiving your praise again. We want to use and teach all kinds of procedures that are going to help students play the game of school correctly. So for example, the SLANT procedure, and if you're not familiar with the SLANT procedure, I've hyperlinked it in here, is all about looking like a student, or looking like, when we're thinking college and career ready, looking like a good employee, right? If I'm slanting, I'm sitting up, that's the S. I'm looking at the speaker. I am attending, right? N is for nodding, right? So we want to make sure students have those appropriate student behaviors. And for some of our students, they've not been taught things like the SLANT procedure. They've definitely not been taught it in an explicit way using the steps of explicit instruction, but we know this increases the likelihood of students being successful. So if you haven't taught it, check out the SLANT procedure and consider that for one of the first things you teach using explicit instruction model. Tip 19, spaced practice matters. If it's important to teach in September, it should be important for students to know in November, in February, and next year. The research shows us that adults need at least 4 repetitions to put a fact in memory. At least 4 repetitions. And often we give students information one time. So we want to make sure that we're spacing that practice over time. So for example, a teacher might say at the beginning, remember, in my class, I will raise my hands so you have think time. And when I put my hands down, everyone responds. So let's practice. And then you do a few practice opportunities. And I'm going to do that over and over and over again throughout the academic year, because that spaced practice matters for success. Tip 20, we want to assign partners and consistently use them using models like Think, Pair, Share, using those models in different ways, right? So for example, if my students are partnered together, the ones might share all you remember about a fact, and then twos would add any that they forgot. Twos might list all the steps of SLANT. Ones would check for accuracy and restate the facts back. Ones might summarize the paragraph or the story. Twos might add details. We want to use those consistent structures so that students know in the moment what they are expected to do. Here are a few other great ideas for partner jobs. If you're looking for ideas, check out this slide or pause the video and dive into some great think, pair, share, or partner jobs in your classroom. Tip 21, we want to make the learning eternal when given a task. In other words, if I ask students to do a job like writing, I want them to continue that work, because when there is a gap, students will fill it. And sometimes they don't fill the gaps with things that are instructionally appropriate. So make sure that the learning tasks are eternal. Here's a few suggestions. Your job is to write all the things you know about explicit instruction and continue to write until I say stop. Add some pictures that support what you've written. Summarize that list at the bottom. Your job is to write all the A words you remember. When you run out of words, turn over your paper and start a new list. See if your two lists match. We want to focus our attention on the function over the form. The function is always going to be our learning target. The form is the task that I assigned, but there might be 50 different tasks I could have assigned to assess if the student understands the learning target. The goal is, do you know the learning target? Not if they always responded to my assignment correctly. Looking for a few good partner ideas? We're looking at our spaced practice concept and revisiting that again. Here are a few more partner work ideas. If you'd like to pause the slide and read through them, please do, because we know spaced practice matters. Tip 23, feedback is only helpful if it relates back to what you taught. Scandalous. I know you all know that it's helpful to have great feedback. We want the feedback to be specific to the learning target. Feedback that is specific to the learning target helps students build skills that they can use to continue to grow and learn in that concept. Tip 24 is to teach the vocabulary necessary for any concept. We don't want to assume that students have the needed vocabulary or that they understand all the background skills. We may or may not have time to teach that within our short lesson, but we definitely could hyperlink into a resource where if students aren't sure of some of the key terms and definitions, that they could put in their earbuds and click a hyperlink to check out those concepts while I'm beginning to teach, so that we know students have that. If the vocabulary is crucial to the lesson, we want to make sure students understand that vocabulary, including the vocabulary of work, thinking about project-based learning. If some of the vocabulary is about how they complete the task, how they engage in the project, we want to teach that vocabulary also. Keep in mind, practice turns and feedback are what make a difference for increasing learning and achievement. John O'Connor's book, Great Instruction, Great Achievement, talks in depth about this detail and was absolutely a mind changer for me when I'm looking at using instructional practices with students, all students, including students with disabilities. So if you haven't had a chance to check out his book, it's called Great Instruction, Great Achievement, and I have linked it into the slides information at the bottom in the notes. But practice turns and feedback, not just me teaching, practice turns and feedback are what make a difference for students with disabilities, with that immediate return on feedback. Tip 25, our final tip of the day, is that in all of our instruction, we need to make sure we are kind. Building relationships by far makes a significant impact. No matter how great a teacher are, if we are not perceived as someone that a student can reach out to, that they trust as a learning partner, then our instructional practice has gaps. So the best teachers are teachers that build relationships and use the elements of explicit instruction to build strong learning communities in the classroom. And this is something I know that we all embrace. So tip 25, be kind and ensure that you have a chance to link into great resources, great people that can build your professional learning community. If you have any questions, please reach out to me or to those close to you that also understand the elements of key design in teaching. If you're doing this as part of our training series, please be sure to complete the quick quiz and our trainings that are on our website. Lots and lots of great things coming up soon. Thank you so much for learning with us. Have a great day.